Hi, everyone. A big digital but human hello from Mitch Jackson during our human side interviews. Welcome to Human.Social, and today's special guest is Shama Hyder. Shama, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Fantastic to see you. I want to introduce you to all of our guests, all of our viewers today. And by the way, this live video interview will be recorded into podcast version later on this afternoon, so it's available to our podcast listeners also. But Shama, according to Entrepreneur Magazine, Shama is the Zen Master of Marketing. Most of us know Shama as a CEO of the Marketing Zen Group and a visionary strategist and acclaimed international keynote speaker and writer when it comes to marketing and digital business and doing business in the digital age. In 2013, Shama was named as one of the top 30 under 30 entrepreneurs in America. That's pretty good, Shama, for only being 19 years of age, by Inc. magazine, and her company was honored at the White House as one of the top 100 U.S. companies to be run by a young entrepreneur by Impact 1000. Before I roll into my first question, Shama, let me just share with our viewers our upcoming guest schedule, if you don't mind. We've got some really cool guests coming up. We've got Chris Brogan tomorrow on the show. If Chris isn't snowed in, if he's able to dig himself out, if he's got power, Chris is going to be joining us later on this week. We've got Martin Shervington, who's a Google Plus expert, speaks around the world about Google Plus. We've got Christy Lightfoot, Bob Berg, David Merriman Scott, Brian Kramer, Joe Paluzzi, Dory Clark. And I've also got Alex Holden, Shama, which is, I don't know if you know Alex, but he's the cyber tech expert that discovered the billion-plus passwords that were stolen on the Home Depot and the Target cyber theft cases. So Alex is going to join us on the show. And we also have Ruth Carter, who's an attorney out of Phoenix, Arizona, that specializes in flash mob law, which I've never heard of a lawyer doing that before.
You have the coolest guests, Mitch, I have to say. You know, I do a lot of these interviews and things like that, but it's just due to my schedule. There's a few that I actually follow, and your series is one of them, just because I think so many of the people that you listed are colleagues of mine and dear friends. So, you know, it's great to see them in action, and I know, you know, like Dory, for example, David, Chris, just great people, great insight. Very value-driven, you know, wanting to share their insight with the community. So, and then the other ones, you know, the flash mob. I've never heard of that, but it sounds fantastic. So I look forward to tuning in too.
Well, thanks, Shama. I appreciate the kind words. You know, before we went live, we were talking about a little bit about, you know, what we've each been up to. And for me, this is just fun. I just love doing this. I love meeting new people. I love sharing really exciting people that are influencing the changes in our world, doing good things, such as you, with my audience. So this is where I keep my sanity. When we're done, when we click the stop broadcast button, I'm going to go back to practicing law, and we'll let the stress build and build and build for the rest of the day. But for now, I've got you. I get to share you with my audience, and I'm so excited. I just loved watching all the things you've done over the years, loved reading your book. I think it may have changed. The name may have changed a little bit, but it's the Zen of Social Media Marketing, an easier way to build credibility, generate buzz, and increase revenue. I've been giving that book out to other business owners, other lawyers that are interested in learning how to go online and do things correctly. But this is what I would like to start off with you asking, and that is, it's only been 7 years since you graduated from the University of Texas.
7 years already? Oh my God!
Unbelievable. And you've done so much, and you've accomplished so many things, and you have really developed a global influence in these 7 years that a lot of people have not been able to do in that short a period of time, if ever. What's your secret, Shama? What have you been doing these past 7 years that separates you from a lot of other people?
You know, I don't know if there's a secret to it, Mitch. It's one of those, like, you keep chipping away at it every day, you know, and I think you, of all people, can understand and appreciate this. I think especially with the millennial generation, and I am part of that generation. It's funny because I've spoken to companies about how to manage this generation and so forth. And I feel like I have an interesting perspective, right, because I am part of the generation, but then I also hire millennials, and I'm on the employer side of things. But I do think that one of the disadvantages to our generation, or like a fallacy many of them share, is this sense of overnight success, right? Which is possible in today's day and age, because you can, technically upload a video to YouTube, get it retweeted by Taylor Swift, and the next thing you know, you're a megastar. But it's so funny because those things are rare. What happens? It's kind of like the preparation has to meet luck, and then you have this strategic serendipity works out really well. But I do think that for 99.9% of people, right, it's a matter of just chipping away at it and working towards something. So, there's days, weeks, months where I go by and I'm like, man, is anybody out there? I'm writing my Forbes pieces, and I'm working with a team, and we're doing, with client campaigns, especially on the marketing side. Like the things we do, search engine, reputation management, some of the stuff is long term. It takes, you really kind of have to keep working at it, and then one day it's like, oh, that's so cool. You see the results, but it really is a matter, I think, of consistently doing things every day, and knowing that you're not going to get a pat on the back every day, or you're not going to get a cookie for sometimes you're going to have to give that to yourself, and know that you are making progress towards something bigger than yourself.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because a couple of years ago I shared a post with everyone about a young lawyer approaching me at the courthouse and talking to me about a couple of accomplishments I've achieved. At that time, it was recently. And it was almost like, well, you're lucky, you're in the right place, this is what happened. And it really kind of bothered me, because it was only after 25 or 26 years of hard work was I then given a certain award, or was I then able to have the ability to get a jury verdict the way I wanted to have one. And so I wrote a blog post about there's no substitute to hard work. So it's really, really good to hear you share your thoughts about chipping away and about putting in the time, putting in the effort. And let's talk, if you don't mind, just a little bit about that. Over these past 7 years, it seems to me, when I'm watching what you're doing, when I'm watching you build this amazing company, I think you have 15, 20 virtual assistants working with your company, positioned around the globe. It seems to me like some of the things you're doing is, when you're speaking in front of a large audience. You're expanding your brand each time you make an effort to do something. You're not afraid to get out there and get in front of the general public, or to speak at a convention, or to travel around the other side of the world to Egypt to attend a week-long seminar on startups and helping people build businesses. So talk to us a little bit about someone who has just gotten out of school, who is just starting their business. Where should their mindset be with respect to getting themselves out there, getting themselves noticed, and not being afraid to make mistakes when they're doing all of this?
Yeah, so
you know what I mean?
It's quite a bit. Now I'll try to do my best to share sort of my experience, my expertise, my personal experience in all of this. And when I started the company, for probably the people who don't know, it was just me. I started it out as a social media consulting company, and now we've grown to being an integrated web marketing digital PR firm. We do have a team of 20, and they're not necessarily virtual assistants. They're actually, experts in their fields, and they are W-2s. They are full-timers. So a different model, but they are virtual in the sense that we've never had it's all cloud-based, right? We don't have an office. We've never had a headquarters, if you will. So funny, actually. We just went on a team meeting. We use a tool, kind of as a side note, but I know your audience appreciates things like this, called Sococo, and it's spelled S-O-C-O-C-O, and it's great because it mimics a physical office on the cloud, and so you can pop into people's offices and have conferences and have the little video on. So it's just kind of cool because our whole team was there. One of our team members just came back from Dubai. The other's in Chile right now visiting her fiance. So we do have a very global team, but an interesting dynamic. Anyway, so just to kind of tie that back in, it's this idea that today, for someone graduating, you really don't have the barriers you did 10, 15 years ago. You don't need an office space. You don't frankly need a huge budget. You don't need a lot of assistants. Like, people are always, I don't really have an assistant. I have a team who does great work, but so much of my things I manage myself, and I've got managers and agents and all that sort of thing, but you don't need the corner office like you used to once upon a time. I think what you have to focus on, especially if you're just graduating, is making sure that you have something of value to share with the world, right? What can you bring to the table? And I think that drives a lot of what I do. I've often joked that my title is Chief Value Officer because
I
I
love it. I
have
love
three
it.
demographics to serve, right? One is sort of my team, my internal team, looking for how can I make our company a better place to work, make it more valuable for them. We attract such great people because of the flexibility and the creativity and working at an environment like that provides. Then I see another constituency, if you will, as our clients, right? So how can we continuously add value for them? What are we doing that we could do differently? We've had one client who's been with us for over 3 years now, and we recently said, listen, we're doing some great stuff, but we really need to change your website. Let's make it responsive. We're just going to do that for you. So looking for ways that we can add value to our clients. And then this, what you're talking about, which is I feel like this global audience that I feel responsible towards. And there's a lot of demographics there. There's women that I feel like I really feel a strong sense, especially young women, of being a role model of sorts. I never really had someone to look up to at that age in that way, where I was like, oh, that who was not an actress or an athlete or in the professional business world, really, there's no one that I can be like, oh, yes, I thought one day I can do that too. So I do think for young people, it's a sense of who do you want to serve? What's your community? Who do you want to impact, right? In that
Right.
way, whose life do you want to make easier and better? And I think starting at that point, it opens up so many doors, because initially I used to I still do so many speaking engagements, but it started out with just me, speaking at restaurants and community centers, just sharing my passion and expertise. And of course, as my career's evolved and things have evolved and my time's become more and more of a precious resource, I now get to internationally keynote for different conferences and speak to different groups. And I really find ways to serve many, which something like this is perfect, right? Because I get, I don't know, hundreds of mentor requests a month, and I would love to email everyone back and say, yes, I'd love to, but just, how this works. It's just not feasible given our responsibilities and obligations. So I look for platforms where I feel like it can be one to many, where I can share my knowledge or help people on a mass scale.
And you do that so well. I mean, for everyone listening, you just heard Shama talking about her first speaking gigs at a restaurant or in front of a small
Without
group.
a mic, I want to add.
Say what? What?
Without a mic.
And I understand that you've progressed to the point where you've actually shared the stage with the President of the United States and with the Dalai Lama. Tell us a little bit how you went from the restaurant to that type of presentation. How did you feel? How did you feel, Shama, the first time you stood up in a small, with a small audience in front of you? And where did you get the courage to stand up and actually share your message? Because I know a lot of young adults are afraid of public speaking, and they're afraid of being criticized for what they say. Oh, my goodness, I'm going to say something wrong. I'm going to use the wrong words. What was that like for you the first time, and what did you learn from that experience carrying it full forward to today?
And I'll say everybody makes mistakes. I think the idea is not to get stuck on perfection, but really look at progress and learning from yourself and learn. I mean, every talk that I do, I look at the feedback, I look at the reviews and say, what could I have done better? How am I going to improve the next time? So I think you realize that you're never going to stand up and be like, aha, I am done. You're never done. Even the best performers. I've heard this great interview with Seinfeld in the New York Times talking about how this guy, who you totally don't expect to doing and still works these club circuits and just shows up, surprises people to practice material. And I think that you have to realize that it's never a matter of am I good or am I bad. It's a matter of, do I have something of value to share, right? So for me, the driving factor was, this is useful information because people in the audience are telling me this really helped me. It made a difference. And I think that's a driver, right? So when I was in that restaurant, no mic, this group of 20 people at tables, I think it was like a barbecue joint or something, and I'm kind of trying to yell, project my voice, but even then, people just came up and said, "This is so valuable. This is important for us to know. I didn't know how this worked, or didn't understand this until you explained it." And I think you have to look for that. Like, what can you bring to the table? Consistently asking yourself that. I do think it's easier to speak on things that you know something about. I think it's much harder to, speak on something like if you said, "Hey, can you talk about cars?" Maybe for like 30 seconds, and after that, it's just going to deteriorate really fast. So I think it is a matter of doing your research, doing your homework. I don't think many people realize that when you get up and do an hour keynote or 45 minutes or whatever it may be, it may take 30 hours of prep to get there. Getting to, for me at least, it's a process. I'll talk to the organizers. I'll get a sense of what's the audience, what do they want the audience to walk away with, what's the audience expertise level like? Are these guys beginners? Are they looking for more advanced techniques? What's the tone of the event? What's the theme? What does the organizer really want me to tie in? Because it's important, right, to serve your client. That's the person that's hiring you. And then creating something for that audience. Delivering it is like the shortest part of the actual process. It's all the pre-work and even the post. I'll go back and I'll assess. I'll see if I want to maybe write a piece on it, kind of piggybacking off the event. So for me, it's really a matter kind of like a value equation rather than I'm up there, I'm talking, I'm off. I will say that it helps that I did oratory and debate in high school. I think the younger you start, so if you have kids, encourage them by all means to start public speaking earlier, build their confidence earlier. Schools, I think, are so much better at that now too, because you have to present, you have to do things. I think if you have younger siblings, right, encourage them to do that, and just you have to keep getting better. I don't consider myself the best speaker in the world by a long shot, but I don't know many people who are. I mean, the best that I know are people who are constantly getting better at it, who are the ones like the people who keep doing the workshops and keep learning from others. And I'm a believer in that. Like, I'll constantly work with people to learn, to get better, to finesse my messaging. The best actors do it, right? So I think it's looking at yourself as a work in progress just as much as you do your work in general.
I love the constant and never-ending improvement attitude. It's a mindset. In other words, you're always looking to improve what you're doing. And I think that is one of the reasons you've been so successful so quickly at such a young age. When you talk about Jerry Seinfeld doing the same thing, going to these comedy clubs, probably not even telling people he's going to be down there, showing up on stage and seeing if his material really works. We do the same thing. I do that with my juries. I'm looking at my photo here. I obviously got sunburned this weekend running. It's hot here in Southern California, and it's like in the middle of the winter, and I'm thinking I got to start using sunscreen. That just is fun. But that mindset, Shama, is so important, and I think a lot of young adults, frankly, don't have that. It's the instant gratification. I want to create the next Instagram, and in 18 months, sell it for $1 billion. That's great if you can do it, but the reality is the best speakers, the best business people out there, they're always looking to improve their craft. Every interview I do, I go back and I try to make the next one a little bit better. I look at these things and I cringe half the time, Shama. I don't like what I'm saying and hearing and how I'm asking the questions, but it's a process, okay? And it's a process that people shouldn't be afraid to take. And when you talk about writing and public speaking and doing debate in high school, last week I had Ann Handley on the show, and we talked about her new book and the power of writing. And I told her I wish I had read her book 20 years ago and spent more time learning how to write more effectively because of today's digital world than I did. I mean, it's such a powerful tool. At the University of Texas, I understand you were a communications major, and you did do a lot of writing, correct?
I did, yeah. So I majored in corporate communication as my undergrad, and then I have a master's in organizational communication and technology.
What is that?
Or common tech. It's really understanding communication at an organizational level, the different layers. I actually looked at even time, how time is perceived, temporal perceptions, very theoretical graduate level stuff. But it's very much a science. It gets very nuanced. People study the communication patterns of everyone from airplane pilots to different layers of within an organization. So a fascinating subject. But one thing, Mitch, that I tell everyone, especially when I speak to high schoolers, junior high kids, college students, is what's the one thing that you can learn to do well in school? Learn to write well.
Okay.
I think in that way I was really lucky that for me communication writing was always a passion. My best scores were always English and history. I enjoyed writing. I used to write a lot more fiction when I was younger. So I think it's easier for people who like that, right, than someone that may not be their main forte. But either way, I think in today's day and age, how you communicate your ideas, whether on camera, written, or verbally, how you express yourself, it's everything. It's 99% of any success that you're going to have in the world is how well you can convey your ideas. And so for me, communication is the ultimate. And I just think it starts early. I think you have to start junior high school level, not just teaching people how to write a paper, right, but really learning how to express what you're feeling, what your thoughts are, and making sure that the other person understands.
I love it. It's such a powerful tool, being able to be an effective communicator. And people need to understand it's not just what you write or say. It's your body language. It's whether or not as you well know. And so with young trial lawyers, we really focus on that. My whole thing is if I've got a young trial lawyer who stutters, I want him or her to be the best stutterer in the world. If it's something that we can't fix, I want them to be real in front of a jury, because a jury's going to get them. The jury's going to understand them and really believe if they're speaking from the heart, their position.
Authenticity. I think if you look at some of the best blogs or writers, you'll find that they're very different in their tone or in their, but all of them have something unique, and their voice really comes across. And I think that's key, is learning how to develop that over time, making it your own. And you're right, it is about being authentic. And here's the thing, right? It's something you can get better at. So it's not one of these, like, I'm bad at this. No, I think communication is one of those things where you are making constant improvements, or you're kind of falling behind, but it's definitely something that one can and should improve upon.
Have you always had this attitude? I know that when you were 9 years old, your family moved from India to, I believe it was Carlinton, Texas. Tell us a little bit about your experience with growing up in India, and then I don't know if you spoke English when you lived there, if you learned English when you came here, but how did that process work, and what experiences did you take away from moving at such a young age to the United States, growing up in Texas, into today's business world, into your success today?
So I think it's interesting, English is my first language.
Okay.
And it's funny because people are like, there's a lot of ESL students, especially in Texas, and from Mexico, and Spanish tends to be their first language. But for me, I grew up bilingual, really, so it's hard for me to say English is, I guess it's fair to say that I have two main languages. I grew up speaking English and Hindi. My parents spoke both to us at home. In India, it was a Cambridge British level education system, so it was an English medium school.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No worries. So moving here, but that's rare, right? For most kids, I think coming in, often they do tend to be English as a second language, and you learn that later. And for me, I guess I was a little bit different. It is funny though, because they put me in ESL when I moved to Texas because I didn't respond to Spanish. And so it was, one of those things about living in a predominantly Latino culture is that people assume that if you share that skin tone that you must be. But anyways, they figured out pretty quickly that I had no problem understanding English. It was really the Spanish that I was having a hitch with. But it's interesting because the education system in the East values different things than the West, right? So the Eastern education system is discipline. It's following directions. It is punctuality. It is memorization. It is very routine, and you see that in sort of the workers, I think, too, the different styles. So the Indian education system, I think, did a great job instilling in me a certain discipline, a work ethic, a follow directions, respect your teachers, march in line. And then I think the Western education system is interesting because it's different value system, right? Where it's more creativity and independence and being able to contribute in a group setting. So you see a lot more like group projects were really new to me because you didn't do so much of that in the East. You know, it's more competitive here. It's more collaborative, I think, in some senses. So I do feel like I got the best of both worlds where it came to education. I think anybody who has the immigrant experience can tell you that it is always a culture shock. I think the younger you are, the easier it is to assimilate. So being 9, right, I think made it much easier for me. Like someone says, "What's home?" and I say Dallas. You know, I don't even think about. You know, I'm of course an Indian native, but for me, Dallas has been home for so long that I don't know anything else but that is my hometown. But I think it's an interesting. I think it's an interesting dynamic. And I have friends who have immigrant parents, whether from Russia or Croatia or Eastern Europe or whatever it may be. And you know, it's funny because we have such similar experiences of learning to value money and hard work. And you know, I didn't. My parents were really against like a handout. It was always like you were going to work hard for whatever you got. And so I feel like I had the first-hand experience of the American dream, which maybe for some of my peers who were born here, not from immigrant families, that was more true for their grandparents' generation or their great-grandparents' generation. But for me, I definitely feel like I grew up with this taste of the American dream.
Well, and so I'm hearing you somewhat validify, you know, the immigrant mentality. In other words, what I've seen, and I have a lot of friends from different countries. We travel quite a bit, and I think one of the best things we've done is taken our kids around the world because it gives them a different perspective on what's going on here in the United States, on how to do business, how to interact with other people, how to respect other people. But what I'm hearing is that through your life influences at an early age, you appreciated and embraced maybe several different types of opportunities that you had growing up in Texas with respect to school or the business world. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And a good micro example of that is libraries. I know it sounds so silly, but growing up, at least when I was in school, you know, the library was more for college students. It's where you go. It's not so much at the elementary level. You have more textbooks.
Really?
Yeah, it might have changed, you know, in the last 20-something years. But that wasn't my experience at school. We didn't have this library that you can go and check out books to. So when I moved to the U.S. and it was like, here's a room full of books you can take home, and I was just, I mean, for me, I was like,
that's crazy.
It's exciting, and I don't think I ever got over that. You know, to me, still like books are the most exciting thing in the world, and I love reading. And you know, when everyone else thought it was nerdy, I would hang out at my lunch hour, you know, trying to hide my lunch from the librarian while just trying to read something new. So I think I had a certain appreciation that I carry with me to this day. Because I think not necessarily of the deprivation, but really of the contrast of the two societies.
Biggest influence growing up, who was it and what was your experience?
Biggest influence growing up?
Positive,
sure, yeah. You know what, I don't think I had, I mean, I think there's always negativity, but I've always been sort of an optimist. So I would say my teachers, you know, and various teachers over the years. Everyone from my graduate advisor, who I still have a lot of respect for. I see her as the ultimate female in the professional world. I learned a lot from her in terms of what it means to, because she was one of the only, most of the department is men, and so I saw her hold her own and do a really good job, and also being a minority. So I think for me, I always looked up to my teachers because I felt like they embodied a sense of giving and caring. I mean, these guys were brilliant, and they were choosing to teach these kids who clearly weren't fully appreciative of their talents, you know, but yet they were doing it. So I feel like for me, my biggest role models and people that I looked up to, started very young, were my teachers in school.
That is so cool to hear. It's funny because I didn't feel that way growing up, and now that I'm a parent, my daughter's AJ is 20. She's at UCLA. She's a communications major, and she's thinking about becoming a judge. So that's kind of what she wants to do. Garrett's a freshman at the high school, but since our kids started attending school, beginning all the way back at elementary school, the light bulb went on. I mean, what an awesome influence. For them, it's laid the foundation for their lives. In addition to the grandparents, and in addition to my wife and I really think the teachers had a huge influence. And I'm going to share that little clip that you just shared with us with some of the teachers that we still keep in touch with, because they need to hear that. They need to hear.
Absolutely.
What a difference they've made.
I reached out, so when we first moved from India, we first moved to New York, uptown New York, Kingston. It's a small town near Poughkeepsie, near the Catskill Mountains. And then we moved to Texas, but I spent like a good 6 months in that school system. And my first teacher, her name was Mrs. Scary. She was not scary, but she was amazing. She had an inherent understanding that this was a totally different culture for me. Clearly, there was a lot of change and upheaval, as a 9-year-old in my life, and she was such a stable factor. She went out of her way to, teach me certain things, to really make it a point to make sure that I was comfortable in my new setting.
Awesome.
And so a couple of years ago, I found her email address, and I emailed her, and I said, thank you so much, and I just want you to know you made a real difference in my life. And you don't think about that. Teachers don't always get to see that because I think people get busy and they don't look back. But for me, teachers have made all the difference. I can honestly say I wouldn't be who I am and where I am if I not had teachers who genuinely believed in me. Actually, you know what? It's so funny, Mitch. I'm going to put this out there because it's a small world. There's one teacher that I never got to thank that I absolutely would love to, but he kind of disappeared. I mean, his name was Michael Weeks. And he was my 7th grade teacher for both English and history. And I think I had hit that age where the things that I thought were so cool were no longer cool, and I sat all the way in the back and kind of like, I was.
So you were sitting next to me in the class.
Well, this is like when you're 12, 13. It's a very angsty age. And he stopped me after class and said, listen, I can tell that you're bored by this, that this is not really the environment you should be in anyways. I think you're bored. I think you need a challenge. So if you'll work with me, I'll make sure that you have assignments that help you, that really inspire and challenge you. And I was like, okay, I think he's got the wrong person, but yeah, let's sure, whatever it took to just get out of the class. And then he made good on his word. He really gave me so much personal attention. One time I read a paper, and he made the class stand up and applaud for it, and it was like kind of like embarrassing, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's making the class do that. But in retrospect, really a turning point for me, in terms of realizing that I had something of value to share, that I was smart. I think it's such an interesting age, right? Like the Super Bowl, the Like a Girl commercials, and it's so true, because up until that age you think you're cool and you're awesome, and then something happens, I think, where you feel like, I don't really know my place in the world. You kind of lose yourself a little bit, and thanks to him, and I never got to thank him. He wasn't part of the regular school district. I think he was teaching as sort of as part of his life plan, but then I went back to something else, and I've never been able to find him. But anyways, he played such a huge role in changing my trajectory.
Well, I think we all need to reach out to him on Twitter, on the social platform.
If I can find him, and trust me, I've tried. I just, but yeah, he was a fantastic influence.
Well, we're going to find him, and I'm encouraging everyone to give Michael a shout out and let him know that Shama had he touched her life, and she has some great things to say about him. I think that would be fun. Do you ever feel as though you're now wearing that hat? You're now the teacher, and you're helping young entrepreneurs that you're speaking to or meeting with, and maybe trying to make them feel the same way, make them feel comfortable about what they're doing, or take them by the hand and make a difference. Are you wearing that hat now, Shama?
To me, that hat is on such a pedestal, Mitch. I feel like I'm not worthy of that, to be honest. Like, I feel like that's such a big job, because I know the place those teachers and those mentors hold in my life, and I'm just like, whoa, me being that to someone else. I attempted, certainly, I think it's certainly the intent is there. Whether I'm 1/10 as successful as those people were, I don't know, but certainly I think I would love one day if someone looks back and says, by the way, you added value to my life in this way. And I think that would be so fantastic, but certainly, I mean, something I aspire towards, but I think it would be too arrogant to say that I'm there.
And I wasn't suggesting that. I just was wondering if that had an influence on how you might take a little bit more time with a young entrepreneur, because this teacher took time with you and made you feel special and made you appreciate what you were doing and all the value.
So that's fair. So I do have a very special place for younger audience members. Like, for example, there's a group called Hobie here, Hugh O'Brien Leadership Organization, that gets together high school sophomores every year, and I speak, and I've spoken there for like 3 years in a row now, and it's always it's so much fun, because I feel like there's an energy with young people. There's this sense of like, there's this sense of potential, right, which I find really like engaging and energizing. So I certainly make it a point to try and give back, especially I think to the younger generation.
Well, and you do a very, very good job of that. Okay, looking from the outside, looking in, looking at all the.
Well, thank you.
No, you are, and that's what's really fun about today's interview. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do want you to put your teaching hat on for us just quickly.
Okay.
And yesterday when I was taking a run, I was listening to a podcast with Peter Diamandis being interviewed and talking about by 2016 there's going to be 1 billion people in Africa with mobile handheld devices with access to information in the right context, somewhat like you sitting in class with your teacher. You had access to that teacher sharing information with you. Everything's changing, and it's changing exponentially. An entrepreneur, someone starting their new business today, 2015, looking ahead 2015 and 2016, what advice do you have with respect to tapping into the digital platforms, social, people skills? Where do you think that individual should start with building a business? Just broad brushstrokes, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Sure. So I'll say that a couple of things, right? For someone who's just starting out, as an entrepreneur, this is more even business advice, not even specifically marketing advice. But I would say, if you do have an idea, make sure it's at the intersection of something you're passionate about, but something the market needs as well. I think people miss the boat sometimes. Like, I love this, but if you don't have market demand for it, it's a hobby, right? That's great, nothing wrong with that. But you do need to make sure that if it's a business idea, that it is something you care about, but there's also market demand. And then really look at the things that I think make something worth talking about, because all these tools are fantastic out there. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you that it's a brand new ecosystem in how we communicate and how we talk, and it's changing the world. But the platform is not a substitute for the message. You still need to have something that differentiates your business, something that makes it so people want to talk about you. So you're not force-feeding your message down, but really is something which people are inspired to share. They want to share. And I think anything that your business is in, regardless of B2B or B2C or however exciting or how boring, it's about finding that key audience that's going to resonate with your message, and being able to deliver to them. I think once you have those things, so much of it is consistency, Mitch, like you and I are talking about so much. It's not, it's never about one podcast or one tweet or I set up my Facebook page or one blog post. It is about consistently doing something over time and building that community, building that collateral, building that reputation, brick by brick, digital, virtual, brick by brick. But it does. It takes time, and success breeds success. I'll be the first one to say this. When you do have a little bit of success, by all means, use that as a stepping stone towards the next thing. But yeah, I think that consistency isn't sexy. People don't think it's like, day in, day out, same thing. But by all means, it is what drives really results for businesses.
The end result can be very, very sexy, and I think that's what a lot of people focus on.
Ka-ching, yeah.
I'm just saying. So, listen, Shama, this was awesome. Really appreciate you taking time to be on the Human Side interviews today, and it's really good catching up with you. It's been too long. If people would like to reach out, both our viewers on the video or listeners on the podcast, what's the best way for everyone to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter at Shama, S-H-A-M-A. You can also find my site at marketingzen.com. We have hundreds of blog posts there every month on different marketing, business, technology topics. And I just want to say thanks so much, Mitch. This was fantastic. You're such a good interviewer. I feel like you make it very easy to have a conversation. I feel like it's a fireside chat. And I just really enjoyed this. I always enjoy catching up with you. And hopefully people watching were able to get something useful out of this interaction.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, this is awesome material. We're going to share it with everyone I come across and on all our different platforms. And Shama, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This was so much fun. Let's stay in touch for sure. And I encourage everyone to go to Shama's websites, check out her blog post. I read each and every one religiously. They're awesome stuff. Get her book. It's just really good stuff. And connect with Shama on Twitter. So, Shama, thank you very much for being on the Human Side Interviews, and we'll see you real soon, okay?
I appreciate that.
Okay, bye-bye.